USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to Weekend Review for Monday, December 21st, 2020. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, today's the last game of the NCHC bubble. They pulled off 38 contests. Folks are saying no other league could have pulled it off. Maybe a couple others could have, but nobody could have pulled it off anywhere near as well as the NCHC did. It was near perfection to put all those teams together, 38 games, 8 teams, and have it come off with nary a hitch.
It's unbelievable, really is. You know, from the top down, Josh Fenton, the commissioner, all 8 schools, and then obviously the University of Nebraska Omaha and what they did themselves. You know, Mike Kemp, former coach, now an athletic director there, and he kind of coordinated the logistics of all of it, and just they literally moved mountains. I mean, you had 2 rinks, a practice rink and a game rink, needing to move teams back and forth. Sometimes they'd practice on the game rink, sometimes they'd have to go to the practice rink. You'd have equipment managers working, but you had just a ton of staff putting in a lot of hours to make sure that this was pulled off. And it was just done well. You know, I don't know a better way to say it. It was just done so very well, and hats off to the NCHC.
Well, let's look at the teams and the games that were played on the ice. Going into the bubble, North Dakota was number 1 in the USCHO.com poll. This week, they slipped to number 3. They lost that first place spot after losing a couple of games in it. But even with a short bench, 17 skaters through most of this, they showed themselves to really be the class of the NCHC.
And they closed strong. 3 wins against St. Cloud State, Minnesota, Duluth, and Miami this week. That's a fantastic way to end things in Omaha. And they can go back to their campus knowing that they have a 7-2-1 record. That's not shabby in the NCHC, and they're playing good hockey, and they have a lot of confidence once they get some of their players back, either from World Juniors or just some of the injuries that'll heal themselves. They're in good shape, and I think that they really do come out, as the class of the bubble. Now, I'll caveat that and say that I think that Minnesota Duluth showed themselves very well in that time as well. They dropped their, a game to North Dakota this past weekend, but they are playing good hockey. They have a lot of the components. They've got to maybe get. You're going to hear me say this a lot during this podcast. I think we're learning that a lot of teams just need more consistency. So a little bit more consistency from the Bulldogs. They'll be right up there at the top as well.
A couple of teams that were good surprises during this, played better than maybe some expected, are St. Cloud. Last year was more of a rebuilding year for Coach Brett Larson. And also Omaha, Mike Gabinet's squad really showed some prowess offensively. I think both of those teams are going to be battling for a spot in the top 4.
Yeah, and neither one, unfortunately, had the best final week. St. Cloud with a couple of losses, Omaha a tie and a loss. So, maybe they didn't close as well as they wanted to, but they both, certainly proved that they're going to be competitive teams throughout this entire season. They have a lot of good components. I think that both of these clubs, having watched them play at times throughout this bubble, showed themselves really well. So I don't know that the fans out there, certainly not the voters in the USCHO poll, had expectations for either of these schools coming into the season. So it's great now that they've left the bubble that both of them are playing this well.
Denver dug itself a bit of a hole in the standings, going 3-6-1 through this. The first 3 games were 1-goal losses, including in overtime. A little bit more lopsided in losses after that. They do have a chance to redeem themselves, though. Their next 4 are against Colorado College before they have a pair at home against North Dakota. They could really pull back some ground through that. But should we be concerned about Denver right now?
Maybe. Yeah, I think, after the first week, you and I talked and we said, don't worry about Denver. They'll be okay. But, at that point they were 0-3 and then they went 3-4-1 after that. And the final week, they start with a win over Western, but then, lose to Miami. They get a tie against Western and then a loss to St. Cloud in the end. So maybe, there is some concern you have to have. I think that they are going back home and knowing that they're going to play their next 4 against Colorado College. But listen, Colorado College at times was a bit of a surprising team. They beat St. Cloud this past week, and I have some concern that if Denver doesn't pull out 4 wins in these games, they are going to find themselves behind the 8 ball, and it's a long road back. Even if you go 3-1 over this stretch, you're still 6. What would that be? 6-7-1. After you've played 14 games, that's not exactly the record that I think a lot of people thought this Denver team would have.
The other 3 teams in the NCHC, and you did mention Mike Haviland's Colorado College Tigers, Miami, Western Michigan, and Colorado College all had some bright points throughout this. Miami, Ludwig Persson had 162 minutes and 2 seconds of shutout hockey, making 85 saves in games against Minnesota Duluth, Omaha, Denver, and CC. So that's pretty terrific. Western Michigan got off to an awful start and rebounded a bit. And Colorado College showing growth from last year. These are all teams that could play spoiler and maybe bump somebody out of the top 4 later in the season.
In CC, let's not forget that they arrived in the bubble a week after everybody else because they had some COVID cases within their program, had to quarantine first and then travel to the bubble. So I think that all 3 of these teams will be spoilers at times this season. It's kind of the unpredictability that we always talk about with the NCHC, a lot of parity and a lot of depth in this conference. But all 3 of these teams, you can't take them lightly on a single night. They will beat you. They've got the talent. Every one of them has the talent to pull off some upsets.
One of the tough things about this being a league-only schedule for the teams in the NCHC is it means that it's going to average out to 500 in a record amongst the 8 teams. In other seasons, you might have 6 or 7 teams in that league above 500 because of non-conference play. When it comes time for the postseason, the whole insularity of the schedule may end up hurting that league in postseason bids, depending on what happens in the formerly smoke-filled room that will be part of the decision-making.
Yeah, that's kind of what's crazy. And I've been talking to a lot of people about this over the last few weeks, and there's no clear decision on how you're going to seed the NCAA tournament. Should we even get there? I guess it's one of those, let's take, small steps first and make sure that we get, to New Year's and then maybe get through January and February before we worry about the NCAA tournament. But it is kind of a big question mark. We know the NCHC is good, but you right now your best team is 7-2-1. You look at the Big Ten, we know that league's good, but your best team is undefeated, 8-0 in Minnesota. So, how do these teams compare? It's very difficult to even really try to make comparisons without non-league play. And I don't know what we're going to have for an NCAA tournament when all is said and done, but it should be a much more difficult process and I do think there will be a few more hurt feelings than there usually are in terms of teams left out. Here we are a day after the college football playoffs were seeded, and there was a lot of griping and complaining there. But everybody, a lot of people I knew that were college hockey fans that were upset about, college football seeding said, I wish they would just do it like college hockey. So here we are in college hockey saying, oh boy, what are we going to do? Because we don't have the pairwise. It's going to feel and look a little bit more like what went on in college football in terms of how they seeded their playoffs. So it'll be a little bit crazy. But it's only a year. Hopefully this thing gets back to normal next year, and we just have this 1 year aberration.
While we're on the topic of the NCAA playoffs, we talked about this a little bit before the whole bubble happened. Now that we've seen how successful it was, could this be the model, the template, the prototype for the NCAA tournament next spring?
I would hope so, Ed, to be honest with you. And maybe it takes 2 bubbles. Maybe you kind of separate the tournament out and teams in the East stay in the East, teams in the West stay in the West. It's an even 8-8 split. You just have to, put up with that for a year. And you do this in 2 cities. Maybe Omaha is the city that the West is in, and then maybe it's somewhere out in the East. Who knows? Manchester, New Hampshire, whatever. There's a lot of ability in some of these cities, hotels and all of that sort of stuff. That's what you really need. You have to have the right components. And Omaha was the perfect city. A lot of hotels, a lot of restaurants right there. So you could do the catering. You could do all of what a team needs just besides practicing and playing games on the ice. But you could maybe take that approach, 2 different bubbles, 2 different pods. And then, once you get to a Final Four, then those 4 teams maybe do, I don't know if it'll be Pittsburgh, or do you just stick with Omaha? They've done stuff so well. They have all of the components there. You have the hotels, you have restaurants, you have a really world-class medical center, and you have a great arena and a second practice rink all attached. So I think that there is a lot of potential to maybe move the tournament into another city in Omaha. At this point, for me, they would be my leading candidate.
Well, there's more to talk about from the past weekend coming up here on Weekend Review.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is USCHO.com's Weekend Review podcast. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, for all intents and purposes, only 3 conferences in Division I men's hockey are playing non-conference games. Arizona State is essentially an 8th member of the Big Ten, so it's not really non-conference play where you get a bit of a mix-up. But Atlantic Hockey, ECAC Hockey, and the WCHA are playing some non-conference games. And one of the top matchups was this past weekend where the ECAC's Quinnipiac hosted WCHA's Bowling Green for a pair of games. And it was a strong performance by Bowling Green. Friday night, a strong win, heavily outshooting Quinnipiac, holding them to 2 shots in the first period, 4-1 win. One of those an empty net. Quinnipiac coach Rand Pecknell pulling his goaltender quite early in that third period and giving up the empty net goal. Then on Saturday, a little bit better performance from Quinnipiac. It was 2-2. Bowling Green had tied the game up, had come back from a 2-0 deficit. Then what was kind of a dubious elbowing call gave a power play late in that third period to Bowling Green. They capitalized right away and then got the empty netter to win 4-2. I don't want to take too much away from Quinnipiac. They looked a little flat-footed maybe to start on Friday, but were strong. But, man, Bowling Green really, really looks good. I love the offensive-minded play of the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you can't, I think early, they had a couple of wins over a Division III school, Adrian, and, you look at their record and you sit there saying, oh, they're 6-1. Okay, well, that includes a couple of wins against Adrian. Maybe they are good, but we can't tell yet. We can tell now. They played a very good Quinnipiac team, traveled the 10.5-hour trip, and that probably took a lot more than 10.5 hours because they did it in a massive snowstorm out here in the East Coast.
Yeah, I hear 18.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And, but Ty Agner, I talked to him. He said, we're used to being on a bus. He said, that wasn't a big deal. And then just kind of, he was very specific about the series itself. And he straight out and said, listen, this is one we had circled on our calendar. We don't get a lot of chances to play, elite teams outside of our own conference this year. So when we had Quinnipiac on the schedule, this is the one the boys have been waiting for. They've been looking forward to it, and boy, did they perform. 2 different types of games, one where they dominated, one where they had to rally. But his comments, just the fact that he believed that this was a big series. Their guys took it seriously, very seriously, and got the victories. I mean, you can't have a much better start to the season when you really look at the way things have gone for Bowling Green. Now they're 8-1. I think that we don't know we're recording this before our poll is released, and I have to think they're going pretty far up in the poll. They were 13 last week. I had them at 7 on my ballot this week, so I think they're a top 10 team, and they proved it this weekend.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. Another team that saw some offense return to the equation was Providence. Head coach Nate Lehman away at the World Juniors, Ron Ralston behind the bench. Very excited to see a big win. What was it, 5-0 on Sunday over Northeastern, coming back from a tie in the first game. What do you take away from Providence's performance and also Northeastern over that weekend?
No, Nate Lehman might not come back now. When he was there, they were outscored 12-0. They've now scored 12 goals themselves in the last 3 games and are 2-0-1 in that span. So, all kidding aside, though, obviously they played very well again this weekend. And they found different ways to get points. They did lose a shootout on Saturday against Northeastern, but they rallied to tie that game. I believe they got a goal with the extra attacker late. So that's a good point, if you will, on the road. And then going back home, a 5-0 victory. I mean, this is to hold Northeastern off the board. And I believe I saw the stat that they didn't allow a power play goal to Northeastern. Northeastern came in just below 50% on the power play after the first weekend, where I think they scored 6 power play goals in the first weekend. So impressive. I think that's a real statement weekend there for Providence. They needed it. They've needed really the last 2 weekends. You throw in a 4-2 win over Lowell the previous Sunday. It's a span of 8 days, and they've probably gotten a lot of their confidence back, because that after a shellacking at the hands of Boston College, 3-0 and 9-0, they needed as much confidence building as they could get.
Another matchup, this one in the Big Ten over the weekend, Notre Dame hosting Michigan State, a tie in the first game, a shutout win for Notre Dame for the point in the standings, and then an overtime victory by Michigan State the next night. I really like Michigan State in these 2 games. Drew DeRitter right now has played every minute for Michigan State, .940 save percentage, 1.99 goals against average, both terrific numbers that should help the Spartans. And they killed off, the Spartans did, 5-minute majors each night. Each of the Krieger brothers took a 5-minute checking from behind penalty. One gets one, the other one gets one the next night. Cole and Christian Krieger killing those off. That was a terrific performance, too. It gave them a boost. But Notre Dame may be a little inconsistent, but I think they are who we thought they are. But I thought Michigan State showed me something that I was hoping to see out of them. They're going to be competitive in that conference and can only get better.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up DeRitter and Ned. Watching, I didn't watch the Sunday game. I got to see the Saturday game, and he stole the show. Obviously didn't win the shootout at the end of the game, and they lose a point in the Big Ten standings, but. In regulation, he kept that team in because Notre Dame had some big chances. He was phenomenal, making save after save. And I believe Notre Dame more than doubled up Michigan State in shots on that game. So it's good to know that you have a goaltender back there that you can rely on. And that will be the biggest, thing that Michigan State will probably lean on this year. I think they could use a little bit more offense. That's the one thing that they seem to be struggling, is getting the goals and scoring. But I thought that some of their opportunities in the second half of the game on Saturday were pretty good. And that now it's just cashing in. You're getting the looks. Now you're going to find a way to cash in. But nobody can sleep on this Michigan State team. They've got a lot. They're starting to play with a little bit more swagger, a little bit more confidence, and they'll be a dangerous team down the stretch.
Usually this would be the halfway point of the season. Most of the activity would have been done, and we would see maybe 15 to 20 games under the belt of some teams. Right now, even though it's halfway through the normal season, to me it feels like early November. We're still trying to figure out who some of the teams are and what they're up to. One thing that I think we can take away from this, I think for most people, except perhaps diehard Golden Gophers fans, Minnesota has exceeded everyone's expectations. Number 1 in the country, which they are again this week. The poll has just come out. In fact, we should mention Bowling Green will be number 9 in the poll. And hats off to them on that fine performance. Also entering the poll, 5-0 American International. But Minnesota, you couldn't ask for a better start for the season for Bob Motzko's squad.
It's certainly, they're playing. I use the word swagger when I talked about Michigan State. They've got a lot of it, and they're doing it with defense. I know that their offense will come around and be rolling at some point, right now they're not needing it. They're getting great goaltending. They're finding ways to shut teams down defensively, and that's a big step in the right direction. And I think you said maybe the only people that wouldn't be surprised are Golden Gopher diehard fans, and the reality is diehard fans are the ones that I see in social media and on message boards saying, "Oh, don't get too excited. They're still going to choke at some point." But I think that this is a pretty good team, and you're only going to play a Big Ten schedule. Again, it's similar to what we were talking about with the NCHC. It'll be hard to match them up and know where they stand as this season comes down the stretch. But I love what I'm seeing from Bob Motzko's team. It's a nice start. It's something that they didn't have last year. I think that they would have liked to have had. So I like the confidence that this team is playing with. They have it all together, and once they start getting goal scoring, which I think that they will, they're going to be a very tough team to beat all year.
The other thing that's been really remarkable at this point in the season is the flexibility of the different leagues in dealing with schedule issues. Big Ten addressed it right on and tried to compress the schedule, and they got the games in for the most part. Going around the country, Hockey East, they decided every game's going to count, every team will get in the playoffs, and they're scheduling and juggling the schedule as things go along. The WCHA has worked in some extra games with the 2 Alaska schools pulling out of the schedule. ECAC had to really juggle things with 8 of the 12 teams not playing. And with Atlantic hockey, there have been pauses and pauses again. Coaches have been finding games and moving games from February to December and things like that to keep it working. Being able to be flexible this season really is the key to getting a season in.
It's the only way, especially for the conferences you mentioned. The Big Ten, you have some elite programs in terms of what they can do, and they're all football programs, so they've been going through in terms of protocols and testing and all of that sort of stuff. They've been going through it as a university and athletic department longer than any other conference, so that's a big advantage to them. The NCHC, they did their bubble, worked very well. I do worry that they're going to go back to campuses, and we're going to see them kind of fall in line with what we're seeing in terms of what Hockey East and Atlantic Hockey and others, in terms of just you don't know, you get to Wednesday and you don't even know if you're really going to be playing on the weekend. That's the reality that we're going to experience here. But you look at Hockey East and you look at Atlantic, and you're finding out games are canceled on Tuesday, and you're spending if you're a head coach in the league, you're spending your entire Wednesday on the phone trying to find games. I look at UConn. They just, I believe it was Thursday. They did not have either a game against UMass Lowell today, Monday, or another game. I think it's UMass that they're playing, or somebody they're playing on Wednesday. They're gonna pick up another game on Wednesday. These games weren't even on the schedule, and to think about Christmas week, and usually these kids aren't even on campus. They're stuck on campus, so you might as well play games. That's Mike Kavanaugh's approach, and that just shows how much flexibility these programs have.
I agree completely. It's been terrific. They've been able to pull it off. I should have mentioned, and we'll close with this, go find the highlight video of Michigan State's Tommy Miller scoring the game-winning goal in overtime against Notre Dame. Miller assisted on the game-tying goal with just 22 seconds left in regulation, and then just a sick deke move and going left to right in front of the goaltender to score. Just a terrific highlight that should be in everybody's highlight reel.
And, we just talked about how good this team can be. You have guys making moves like that one. And if you haven't seen it, I got a chance to pick it up on social media last night. Really impressive move. And that's a skilled player right there.
Well, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.